I don't know about y'all, but the Vampire Diaries raised me. The fantasy, girly, obsessed with werewolves, vampires, in TV shows. Cause you know, movies, Twilight. Oh, we found the plot. We found the plot this episode. The Twilight franchise raised the generation of fantasy girlies.
Cocky.
All the fantasy girlies out here, you feel me, that are obsessed with vampires, werewolves, anyone, you get it, okay? We can link that obsession to Twilight. It was everywhere. And if you didn't like it, you were a hater.
Bingo!
Sorry, I don't make the rules. That's just what it is. So when Twilight came out, right, I didn't actually see the first movie in theater. I actually saw it on demand. Yes, it was available on demand, and I was at home with my mom, my brother. I was like, okay, let's rent it and watch it. Child, who told me to do that? Once I saw Twilight, I was obsessed. And I saw it at such a good time because the second movie, I feel like it was coming out a few months after, so I didn't have to wait as long as those who watched it from the beginning. Child, I don't know what it was about the first movie, but it just fed my teen angst. Honestly, I was not Team Edward, okay? I'm sorry. But I did like the relationship of Edward and Bella. It was cute, you know? Edward was mysterious. Bella, she was a little dainty, a little nerdy. No, I would say more so lanky, or yeah, whatever. And then, you know, Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart together, child, it was magic. It was magic. Keep in mind, Twilight was a low budget film, but it did its job to secure a bigger bag. They didn't have much to work with because the wigs were not good. The pale skin was pale, child. I mean, it got paler as the movies went on, but still, the contacts weren't that great. They made lemonade out of lemons. Yeah. Once I saw the first film, I was a goner. I was locked in. I was like, all right, mommy, we gotta see the second movie. So I saw New Moon on opening night, and that honestly became a tradition. Opening night, it was me, my mom, and my best friend. Front row, watching those movies. Beautiful. Great memories. If you were a fan of the Twilight franchise when it was at its height, everyone was talking about it. Literally, you saw Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson, and Taylor Lautner, the big three, before, you know, the big three from This Is Us existed, okay? But yeah, you definitely saw them everywhere. Interviews, pictures, it was crazy. I was one of those fans that literally went into, like, you know, your local pharmacy, like Walgreens, Wayne Reed, to get those magazines of just each of the film projects. Like, you know, when they had the posters of everyone, the cast interviews, just like, I had those books. It was a collectible item for me, okay? I'm not sure if I have any. One second. New Moon, you feel me? And then we have Breaking Dawn. I definitely do have the Eclipse book, but I was trying to rush to film this video, so. But yeah, I definitely was one of those fans that collected all those magazines because I was obsessed, you know? I was obsessed and I had to take it all home with me. I still even have the DVDs. Twilight made a big imprint on my childhood. As someone who didn't read, you know, fantasy novels growing up, I really didn't. Watching just Twilight, that whole book franchise come to life without knowing any of the background, definitely just opened up my eyes. This is like a new world I'm entering. Yes, I'm familiar with witchcraft, charm, the craft, and then I'm also familiar with vampires. Shout out to Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, okay? But I think with just that movie, especially it being created at a time where all of my peers were watching, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to tap in. I just have to watch it. And I think also being that, you know, the actors were attractive, I was like, oh, let me tap in more. You have Robert Pattinson, teen heartthrob, you know, and then you had Taylor Lautner. Child. You see him, you faint. Even at that age, I was like hitting puberty and I was seeing like just this like beautiful cast. I'm like, whoa. Kellen Lodge, Peter Ficcinelli. What was Jasper's character's name? Y'all know what I'm trying to say. I wanted to see what it could grow into, and I also just wanted to keep seeing the cast members, all right? Even with that, right? The storyline, the forbidden love, a human with a vampire. You know, we ate up the forbidden love, child. Especially as a teenager, child. You tell a teen no, they gonna do it still. The no is just telling the teen to do it. You feel me? And the bad boy, bad background, because, you know, vampires are supposed to fear them. But Bella was like, no, I don't fear you. I'm in love. Which was a little crazy because, you know, if we actually think about it, child, that was a little cuckoo for cocoa puff. Human blood next to someone that could suck it out of you.
Nope.
started off with vampires, you know, the beauty of vampires, the immortality. We all make fun of this now, but like how they glisten in the sun instead of, you know, dying in the sun. It was very interesting, you know, that was a little twist, that was a little spin to it. I was feeling it, I was feeling it. And then, you know, the speed, the strength. And I think also just like the Cullen family, they had this element of mystery that everyone just wanted to like follow. The cast and director, they did a good job just choosing the Cullen family as a whole. Each character just had something that, ooh, I want to see you. And as a fan, like, I loved it, you know, like, ooh, I want to be a vampire. And then werewolves, right? Even with how they're portrayed in the Twilight series, right? Some TV shows, they do werewolves with just like the human form still being there, but then they just have the hair all over them and just look like a werewolf. But Twilight series, actually, you know, the human body turned into a werewolf. I mean, turned into a wolf. That was interesting to see. Yeah, you know, and they were big. They were like big, 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 big. They weren't like the little wolves. So like they were human-sized wolves. Very interesting to see. That kept me tapped in. And then even with like the element of their anger, you know, like in New Moon, when Paul gets mad at Bella, I think she slapped him. He's like, "Hurr," and then he turns into a werewolf. I mean, turns into a wolf. I keep saying werewolf, child. It was like, whoa, what's going on? And then even when Sam's girl Emily, you know, she had the claw on the face because Sam got mad at her and, you know, did that to her. It was like, whoa, this is a lot, but I'm tapped in. I want to see what's going on. As a young girl getting exposure to like fantasy films, I was like, oh, this is something I could get into. And then you had the mortals, child, the regular folks. The only mortal that I really cared about was Charlie, you know, Bella's dad. And then not that many, honestly. Yeah, you know, so you had the mortals, you had the werewolves, you had the vampires, then you had the element of the Volturi, you know, that came into play in New Moon when Edward was trying to offer himself for sacrifice when he thought Bella was dead, child, whatever. But yeah, you know how you had the Volturi that was overseeing vampire interactions, how they live in the world. That was a cool element to the Twilight series because usually, honestly, you know, vampires exist in the world and movies and whatever, fantasy. They just living to live. There's not really an overseer that wants to keep the vampire secret confidential from the world. And then, you know, even with the werewolves, the council, you just like the bloodlines, you know, making sure everyone knows who their ancestors are, where this comes from. It was cool, it was cool. You know, there was some history to it and it definitely helped with the fantasy genre. While yes, fantasy definitely played a part in just the success of the Twilight series, I also think the storylines definitely kept people wanting more. You know, from the first movie, Bella being introduced to vampires and what that looks like with her being meshed into their world. Her moving from her mom to build a relationship with her dad, then her going to school, meeting Edward Cullen, then, you know, being exposed to the Cullens, and then hanging out with them. She becomes a target because, you know, she's human, child. And then her almost dying, but then she realizes she loves Edward, so she got to stay where she is with him. You know, you got that forbidden love. Edward's like, I can't do this, but I want to do this. Ugh, child. And then, you know, in the second film, you know, Bella gets hurt. Edward's like, I gotta go, I gotta leave you. And then we got the Jacob era, okay? That was one of the best eras. New Moon, love New Moon, oh my gosh. Jacob comes more into play, his relationship with Bella. Bella realizing, wait, you growing up, I have feelings for you. And then, you know, Jacob becomes a werewolf. Bella gets exposure to the werewolf side. She's a little hypocrite because she was trying to expose the werewolves instead of exposing the vampires, so whatever. And then, you know, Bella still loves Edward, child, so she leaves Jacob to go to Edward. And then you get the introduction to the Volturi, child. The Volturi's like, well, you know, Bella, you a human, so we gotta kill you. But Edward's like, no. So, you know, the Volturi tells Bella, like, hey, girl, you gonna have to turn into a vampire, right? And Bella's like, okay. And then New Moon ends with Edward's like, you gonna have to marry me before you turn into a vampire. And then, you know, it goes into Eclipse. The whole movies, Bella's like, okay, am I gonna marry him? I'm in love with Jacob. Then you have James' girl, Victoria, trying to go after Bella. Oh my gosh. I'm going through the plots of each movie, but it's actually so good. Like, if you really think about it, each storyline, hey, it may sound corny listening, but I'm telling you, every year when a new movie was dropped in the series, everyone showed up because everyone wanted to know what happened next. And keep in mind, it was not only like those who read the books, it was also those who didn't read the books, but still wanted to know what was going on. Communities were colliding, and that was good. Top 5 moments from the series. Let's do top 3. I'm gonna do top 5. No orders. When Jacob and Bella kiss on the mountain, and it happened in clips because, you know, everyone wanted to watch it. Was I a Jacob fan? Yes. Is my bias showing? I'm sorry. Bella's birthing scene. Oh my, that was a lot. From her bones breaking to Edward and Jacob like yelling at, it was a lot. Carlisle's head being chopped off by the Volturi. Oh my gosh. When I tell you everyone in the theater went crazy, everyone was like, this is not in the book. What is going on? Meanwhile, I didn't read the book, so I'm like, oh my gosh, Carlisle died? I would equal that moment to when Captain America picks up Thor's hammer. Yes. And if you're an Avengers fan, you know the feeling I'm talking about. I'm getting chills talking about it, literally chills. Yeah, that was a crazy moment as a fan. Is there an Edward scene that was amazing? I'm gonna do top 3. When Bella and Jacob kissed on the mountain, when Bella gave birth, and when Carlisle's head was chopped off. Okay? Honestly, I don't know. If there's more, drop it in the comments, but I'm sorry. Those are the top 3 moments. I think the Twilight series definitely raised a generation of just folks who love fantasy. That's what it comes down to. This video was initially going to be about Vampire Diaries, and I was going to talk about how Vampire Diaries made me a fantasy girly, but I was like, wait, that's a lie. That's a lie. Because it was Twilight. I didn't realize how hard I could go for a fantasy genre or a fantasy franchise. Because honestly, I did not appreciate the Harry Potter franchise until later. I'm a Ravenclaw. It was the Twilight franchise that really made me a fantasy girly. I will also say Vampire Academy played a role. If you know, you know. All my book girlies, if you know, you know. Twilight was one of the best fantasy franchises for those who love mess. It was messy, it was chaotic, teen drama, forbidden love. We loved it, child. But at the same time, like, it told a story. You know, it was a messy story, but it was a story nonetheless. And then we had our imagination just to go with everything. Twilight was for the messy kids who love to read, who love fantasy. Yeah. Twilight was that franchise, okay? You could still watch it through today. You may have to take breaks, but I would encourage you just watch it and just experience what Twilight was. There are some corny moments, okay? Even like in the first movie when they do like baseball thunder type stuff, very corny, child, very corny, but we loved it. We loved all of the corniness that Twilight offered us, and that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching my video, y'all. I'll be back next week. Whew. Did I read the books? No. Whoa, honestly, I am freeballing. Me personally, I wasn't gonna, but I was gonna scream. We're from Wisconsin! From the bloop. I loved it. Hello? Child, Twilight came in 2006. Franchise. Yeah!